The Sayings of Anandamayi Ma, Chapter 11. Question by a devotee. Well, it does not seem possible to perform action without desire. That is to say, devoid of attachment for either the work or its fruit, but solely from a sense of duty. According to the sastras, only the man who has achieved perfect fulfillment is capable of such action. So long as one is linked to sense objects, it is impossible. Yet, what is taken up in a spirit of dedication to God may well develop into work done without any desire. Sri Ma's reply: whether with or without desire, it is still action. One cannot possibly remain without action until the state of pure being comes. Therefore, let this aspect of the matter also be understood. When you surrender yourself to the Guru, you have to obey his orders unconditionally. In this, your sole motive is to carry out the Guru's will. Consequently, when going about the task, you grow eager to do your utmost. Can you call this also a desire in the ordinary sense of the word? To set your mind on being efficient, with the one object of fulfilling the Guru's will, is certainly a good desire. If, for any reason, there should arise even the least feeling of resentment, the action can no longer be described as being without attachment. Suppose, for example, after having accomplished by far the greater part of some work, you have to abandon it, and towards the end, someone else takes it up, completes it, and gets the credit for having achieved the whole of the task. If you mind this even in the slightest degree, how can the work have really been done disinterestedly? Obviously, it was not quite far from a desire for recognition. When you have surrendered yourself to the Guru or teacher, he may do anything, subject you to no matter what trials, yet you still regard yourself as a tool in his hands. You will then have reached a stage where, in spite of all difficulties, you persist with the work, knowing it to be the Guru's order. Keep in mind that by this attitude, you will grow steadfast in endurance, patience, and perseverance, and your energy and capacity will be enhanced. In action, there is bound to be conflict. When can there be freedom from this conflict? When there is no question of feeling hurt. Even in the midst of work, at all times and under all circumstances, one must be prepared to obey any kind of order. Imagine you are hungry, and just as you are raising your hand to put food into your mouth, you are asked to go elsewhere. At that very instant, you should gladly let fall the food you were about to eat and obey the call. Such an attitude is an indication of one's becoming established in a happiness that is not of this world. When one is nearing effortless being, which means sustained effort ends in effortless being, in other words, what has been attained by constant practice is finally transcended, then comes spontaneity. Whether one is blamed or not for some shortcoming in one's work leaves one quite indifferent. Then only does one become an instrument in his hands. The body moves like a tool, and one watches it in the nature of a spectator. Then one observes what a great variety of work gets done by such a body, and in how very smooth and efficient a manner. Egoless work is full of beauty, for it is not prompted by a desire for self-gratification. So long as the knots that constitute the ego are not unraveled, even though you intend to act impersonally, you will get hurt, and this will produce a change in the expression of your eyes and face, and be apparent in your whole manner. Too long, let my heart be free from craving for results, is still a desire for a result. Nevertheless, by thus aspiring after selfless action, there is hope of its coming to pass. A knot means resistance. Hence, so long as the ego persists, there will be clashes at times, even when impersonal work is attempted, because one is bound and therefore put in a certain direction. Question. So, until one has attained to perfect fulfillment, acting without a motive is an impossibility? Sri Ma answers, when impersonal work is being carried out and watched by a spectator, a deep joy surges up from within. If at that time the body gets hurt, even this becomes a source of happiness. Nevertheless, this welling up of joy is not identical with self-realization. The thrill of delight brought about by impersonal work is his delight, become one's own. His gladness, felt as one's own, a stage has been reached where happiness is bound up with him. In this condition, since one has lost interest in worldly pleasures, a great deal of work can be done in a perfect way. And even if despite one's utmost efforts, some task has not succeeded fully, one does not feel disturbed, for everything has its place. Here also his will prevails. Do you not see what an exquisite path this is? But the aforesaid holds good only when action is not tainted by a sense of possessiveness. However, even this state is by no means self-realization. Why not? Whether with or without desire, it is work that is referred to here. Although done impersonally, the action still remains separate from the doer. Whereas, where the self is and nothing but the self, there the guru, his instructions, the work, cannot each exist separately. So long as the duality of precept and action persists, one cannot possibly speak of self-realization. The play of one who has attained to final consummation is entirely different from the work that has become selfless by effort. This has been explained here in reply to your question. Even when the state of samadhi has been reached, during which one seems to be wholly absorbed within, this also is still a state. Yet, when by this spontaneous inner process the veil is lifted, then the vision of reality may come about. It can never come through outer activity, such as the attempt to efface desire. Another thing, there was a time when this body, Sri Ma is referring to her body, tried to carry out to the very letter anything. Bolana, which her husband asked for. But when he saw that this body became rigid, that he was incapable of performing certain types of worldly actions, unable to bear them, he himself mostly and gladly took back his request. This is how, notwithstanding that some tasks could not be attended to, strict obedience was being observed in one sense. However, one day, the husband of Bolana's sister, Bolana is her husband, Srima's husband, so she's saying the husband of her husband's sister, came on a visit. When he saw that this body obeyed Bolana in all matters, he felt annoyed and exclaimed, "Have you no opinion of your own? Have you to consult your husband about every little detail? What a state of affairs! Suppose he asks you to do something wrong, would you obey then also?" He got the reply, "Let such an occasion arise." And on setting out to put the order into practice, see what would come to pass. The answer left him dumbfounded. Henceforth, he changed his mode of life and remained ever devoted to the supreme quest. There is a state in the spiritual life where unconditioned, self-sprung action is possible because there are no ties, and where no ties exist, there is no danger and no wrong path. One cannot take a false step. Question: was it not after self-realization that you were in that condition? Sri Ma answers, "Leave this body out of it. If you say that this condition only comes after self-realization, you will have to understand that it is possible to play anywhere, in any way. Oneself playing all parts of oneself, of course, which is quite different matter from what has just been mentioned. It is a state of oneness. Even while remaining in division, one is undivided and remains in oneness, though appearing divided. This is thatness itself. Here, to obey and to disobey, both are that. There are signs by which actions done as an instrument before self-realization can be recognized. At this stage, the stream of action is directed towards the fulfillment of actual needs, whereas in the state of pure being, it is totally different. To do or not to do, call it what you will, or is that. Within this sphere, everything is possible, not to eat while eating, and to eat though not eating, to walk without feet, to see without eyes, and much more of the kind, as you would put it. When established in the self, who obeys whose bidding? There are no others, none are separate. No longer does one talk to another. How can there still be the relationship that is based on the sense of separateness? The level of selfless action is quite different from the state of self-realization. So long as the Guru, the love of him, the work, the I are perceived separately, there is no question of self-realization. Yet, it must be said that action dedicated to God is not of the same order as work prompted by desire. The one is for the sake of union, which leads to enlightenment. The other for the sake of enjoyment, which leads to further worldly experience. What alone is worthy to be called action is that action by which man's eternal union with God becomes revealed. All the rest is useless, unworthy of the name of action, no action at all. It is not a new kind of union which has to be established, but rather the union that exists throughout eternity. is to be realized. Very well, now listen to something else. There is a stage where working is very delightful and gives intense happiness. Here one is quite unconcerned with what may or may not result from one's action. The work is done entirely for its own sake, for the love of it. Neither is there an external guru in this, nor the love of him. A state of being of this kind does exist. There is great diversity in the realm of action. The sense of contentment experienced at the fulfillment of some worldly desire is relative happiness. This desire may be for one's wife, son, a relation, or any other person, and accordingly, the fruit inherent in such particular action will be reaped. This is working for the sake of self-satisfaction, not for the sake of union. It brings sorrow along with joy. Now come back to what has just been said about work done for the love of it, not for anybody. Imagine how much at times gets accomplished even while walking in the street, not for anyone's sake. Work for the sake of work, work itself being one's only God. This also is one of the states. But if one goes on performing action of this kind, there comes a day when one is liberated from action. There is such a thing as laboring for the welfare of the world. But here, even this purpose is absent. It is a kind of work not actuated by desire or craving. One just cannot help doing it. Well then, why is it done? One simply is in love with the work. When God manifests himself in the form of some work, which therefore exercises intense attraction on a particular person, then, by engaging in this work again and again, one is finally liberated from all action.